Welcome, weary traveler, to a tale not often spoken, a chapter torn from the great book of time, whispered only in the deepest shadows, and among those who dare to gaze into the abyss of forgotten history. Tonight, we shall journey to a forgotten kingdom, a realm lost to the mists of antiquity, where the very air was thick with intrigue, ambition, and a darkness that festered at the heart of power. A land where the rivers flowed with the clarity of crystal, and the forests whispered secrets of old magic, and displayed a strategic mind that surpassed even the most seasoned advisors. Her wit was as sharp as a newly honed blade. Her words, when she chose to speak them, were laced with a captivating charm that could sway even the most hardened skeptic. He saw in her the strength he lacked, the keen intellect needed to guide the kingdom through the burgeoning political storms that threatened Eldoria's borders. His end was peaceful. In his sleep, the royal physicians declared, attributing it to old age and a broken heart. The courtiers, resplendent in their finery, moved with a forced joviality, their eyes darting nervously towards the new queen, whose composure was absolute, her expression unreadable. She was a statue of perfect, cold beauty, enthroned with the obsidian mirror, now prominently displayed behind her, reflecting the distorted images of the assembled dignitaries, their faces elongated, their features twisted into grotesque caricatures. The whispers intensified after she ascended the throne, not merely whispers of disappearances and misfortunes, but of a growing obsession. The queen, they said, spent endless nights in her private chambers, illuminated only by the faint, shimmering glow of the obsidian mirror. She would trace its dark surface with a finger, her lips moving in silent incantations, her eyes, now truly the color of twilight, burning with an unnatural intensity. She seemed to draw strength, or perhaps something darker, from the ancient artifact. Her beauty, already legendary, became even more pronounced, almost ethereal, yet tinged with a chilling, inhuman quality. It was as if the mirror was feeding on her soul, or perhaps it was merely reflecting the darkness that had always resided within, now amplified, given free rein. Yet, a few, those with a more discerning eye, noted the faint, almost imperceptible chill that permeated the royal chambers on the night of his passing. Laughter became rare, replaced by hushed conversations and the soft rustle of silk as courtiers moved with exaggerated caution. The grand feasts, once occasions for joyous celebration, became austere affairs, overshadowed by the queen's silent, watchful presence. Her gaze, when it fell upon someone, felt like a physical weight, a suffocating presence that could steal the breath from one's lungs. Yet her reign, in the eyes of the outside world, was a testament to her unparalleled genius. Eldoria flourished, its armies unconquerable, its coffers overflowing. Embassies from distant lands arrived daily, seeking alliances, offering tribute, and the queen, in her chilling brilliance, entertained them all, her charm as potent as ever, a veil drawn over the abyss that lay beneath. But beneath the surface of this manufactured prosperity, a profound rot had set in. The very soul of Eldoria, once pure and vibrant, was slowly, being corrupted by the darkness emanating from its ruler. The land itself seemed to weep, the forests growing denser, the rivers flowing with a mournful murmur, as if echoing the silent screams of those who had vanished without a trace, sacrificed on the altar of the queen's escalating madness. And it was in this atmosphere of chilling opulence and silent terror that the most terrifying aspect of her reign began to unfold, an aspect that would forever engrave her name into the darkest annals of forbidden history, leaving behind a trail of broken lives and shattered souls, a haunting legacy of unimaginable horror. The stage was set, the players unwitting, for the grim, nightly ritual that would define the reign of the Obsidian Queen. The whispers of the crown, once a gentle hum of duty and lineage, had twisted into a silent, incessant shriek, urging her ever deeper into the abyss in Eldoria the Beautiful. Ancient kingdom was about to become the backdrop for a series of unspeakable atrocities, each one a brushstroke in the macabre masterpiece of a mind consumed by a unique and terrifying madness. The true terror was only just beginning to unfurl its dark wings, a chill that seemed to emanate not from the cold stone walls, but from an unseen, malevolent presence. And as the last breath left his body, the princess, now queen, stepped forward, her face a mask of sorrow that fooled all but the most perceptive. The crown, an ancient artifact, heavy with the weight of generations, settled upon her brow, and as it did, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred. The light in the halls seemed to dim, the air grew heavy, and a profound, unsettling stillness descended upon the court. It was as if the very spirit of Eldoria, once vibrant and hopeful, held its breath, sensing the dawn of a new, terrifying era. He elevated her to his most trusted advisor, granting her unprecedented authority, unaware that he was not merely entrusting her with the reins of power, but also, perhaps, unwittingly, with the very soul of the kingdom. The princess, now a woman in the bloom of her unsettling beauty, began to exert her influence. Her decisions were swift, decisive, and often ruthless, yet undeniably effective. Her reforms strengthened Eldoria's defenses, her diplomatic maneuvers outwitted rival kingdoms, and her economic policies brought unprecedented wealth to the royal coffers. The people, at first, lauded her as a prodigy, a savior sent to guide them through troubled times. But soon, the whispers began anew, darker, more insidious. Those who opposed her, those who questioned her methods, those who even inadvertently crossed her path, seemed to disappear without a trace, or met with sudden, inexplicable misfortunes. Their names were erased from official records, their families ostracized, their very existence fading into the collective amnesia carefully cultivated by the increasingly powerful shadow that now clung to the princess's every step. Yet, beneath this veneer of brilliance and grace, a dark current flowed. There were whispers, at first faint and dismissed as mere superstition. Servants spoke of strange occurrences in her chambers, of objects moving without touch, of a chilling aura that sometimes emanated from her when she was deep in thought, or, more disturbingly, when her temper, rare but volcanic, flared. They spoke of the garden where she spent hours alone, staring into the depths of a still pond, as if communing with unseen entities. But these were just whispers, easily ignored in the grandeur of the royal court, dismissed as the fanciful imaginings of superstitious minds. For generations, the crown of Eldoria had passed down a lineage of wise and just rulers, their reigns marked by prosperity and peace. A sudden, inexplicable illness swept through the palace, taking the queen with brutal swiftness. Grief, a universal sorrow, gripped the kingdom, but in the princess, it manifested differently. While King Theron was consumed by a profound, debilitating sorrow, his daughter retreated further into herself. Her already rare smiles vanished entirely. Her eyes, once merely unsettling, now seemed to hold a permanent shadow, as if she had looked too deeply into the abyss, and it had gazed back. It was after her mother's death that the princess discovered the obsidian mirror. It was not a mirror of common glass, but a perfectly polished slab of volcanic glass, ancient and cold to the touch, hidden away in a forgotten chamber of the royal archives. Legends whispered that it had once belonged to a sorceress of immense power, a queen who had sought to pierce the veil between worlds. The princess, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion, spent hours before it, her reflection a pale, almost translucent image against its inky depths. They said, those few who dared to glance at her in those moments, that her lips would move silently as if in communion with an unseen presence, and that sometimes a faint, almost imperceptible tremor would run through the ancient stone of the chamber. But even the brightest sun casts the longest shadow, and the seeds of decay, often unseen, can lie dormant for centuries, waiting for the opportune moment to sprout into a monstrous tree. It was into this world, seemingly idyllic, yet ripe for the grotesque, that the girl who would become known as the Obsidian Queen was born. Her name, a delicate melody now lost to time, was spoken only in hushed tones, imbued with a fear that transcended mere human dread. From her earliest days, there was an unsettling luminescence about her, a stark beauty that drew all eyes, yet a chilling stillness in her gaze that seemed to penetrate beyond the veil of ordinary perception. They said her eyes, the color of twilight skies just before the first star appears, held a depth that bordered on the infinite, and perhaps on the void itself. She was born to King Theron, a monarch of gentle disposition, and Queen Isolde, whose beauty was matched only by her gentle spirit. They loved their daughter dearly, showering her with affection, blind, as parents often are, to the insidious tendrils of something otherworldly that seemed to cling to her very essence. Our story begins, not with a flourish of trumpets, but with the subtle, insidious creeping of shadows across a throne. a throne destined to be occupied by a figure so enigmatic, so terrifying that her very name was eventually erased from all but the most forbidden scrolls. Forget, for a moment, the comforting narratives of kings and queens, of glorious victories and noble sacrifices. Tonight, we delve into the chilling truth of a reign steeped in madness, a reign where passion and death were inextricably intertwined, a reign that has haunted the sleep of chroniclers for centuries. Our stage is set in the ancient kingdom of a land renowned for its breathtaking beauty, its soaring mountains, and its verdant valleys. As she grew, her intelligence became undeniable. She devoured scrolls of ancient lore, mastered the intricacies of statecraft with astonishing speed. The true turning point, the first fissure in the seemingly unblemished facade, came with the death of Queen Isolde. King Theron, lost in his grief and increasingly frail, began to rely more and more on his brilliant daughter. The old King Theron, now a ghost of his former self, wasted away, his spirit broken by grief and the subtle, chilling transformation of his beloved daughter. Her coronation was a spectacle of somber grandeur, yet beneath the pomp and ceremony, a palpable tension vibrated in the air. The court, once a vibrant hub of artistic and intellectual pursuits, began to transform. The coronation had marked a profound shift, a subtle yet undeniable change in the very fabric of the royal court. The air, once merely tense, now crackled with a chilling anticipation, a silent dread that permeated every stone of the ancient palace. It was in this suffocating atmosphere, where ambition warred with terror, that the Queen's unique and horrifying predilections began to manifest. No sounds of merriment, no distant strains of music, only the pervasive stillness, broken occasionally by the rustle of leaves outside, carried on the gentle night breeze. Soon, another nobleman, this time a hardened warrior, Sir Gareth, known for his unyielding strength and courage, found himself the object of the Queen's chilling attention. The desire for power and royal favor, once paramount, was now secondary to the overwhelming need for self-preservation. No man dared to meet the Queen's gaze for too long, lest he become the next subject of her macabre selection. No screams were ever heard, no struggles, no sounds of violence, only the profound, unsettling silence of the royal chambers, followed by the silent discovery of another victim in the morning. Foreign ambassadors, arriving with proposals of alliance or trade, found themselves navigating a court steeped in unspoken dread. Their queen, once lauded as a brilliant leader, now became a figure of hushed whispers and fearful legends. Tales of her unnatural beauty, and the inexplicable fates of those who came too close, spread like wildfire through the taverns and villages. Children were warned not to speak her name after dark. Mothers would clutch their sons closer, fearing the distant, unseen pull of the palace. The land itself seemed to mirror the internal turmoil of its ruler. The seasons became more extreme, the harvests less bountiful. The sun itself seemed to shine with a colder, less comforting light. It was as if the very spirit of the land was recoiling from the pervasive evil that emanated from the heart of its governance. Their initial awe at her beauty and power quickly transformed into a chilling apprehension. Her power was absolute, her control over the military unwavering, and the lingering fear of the mysterious, untraceable deaths was a potent deterrent. The few who had even hinted at resistance, at a desire to confront her, had simply vanished, their absence serving as a stark reminder of the futility and the danger of opposition. The Queen, in her cold, serene majesty, remained untouchable, a terrifying enigma, enthroned in a kingdom consumed by her darkness. She was the serpent in the garden of pleasures, enticing, beautiful, and utterly deadly. Each night, the moon, a silent witness, cast its pale light upon the palace, knowing that somewhere within its ancient walls, another life would be extinguished, another soul would be claimed by the Obsidian Queen, her insatiable ritual continuing, shrouded in mystery, steeped in terror, and leaving behind only the echoing silence of death and the lingering scent of despair. The chilling reality of her reign was not just the deaths themselves, but the systematic erosion of hope, the crushing of spirit, and the transformation of a once vibrant kingdom into a gilded cage of silent fear. The stage was set for the further escalation of her madness, for the unleashing of even deeper horrors, as the Queen's true nature, and the source of her terrifying power, slowly, inexorably, began to reveal itself. The true, terrifying heart of the darkness was yet to be fully exposed, and the kingdom of Eldoria, unwitting and terrified, was about to be plunged into an even deeper. They heard the whispers, saw the fear in the eyes of the courtiers, and though they came seeking favor, many left with a profound sense of unease. Their missions often curtailed their pronouncements of peace, tinged with an unspoken warning. Eldoria, once a beacon of prosperity and strength, was becoming an island of beautiful, terrifying isolation, its borders guarded not just by its formidable armies, but by the chilling reputation of its enigmatic queen. Some speculated it was a poison, so potent and undetectable that it left no trace. Others whispered of dark magic, of a sorceress drawing the very life force from her lovers. A few, the most ancient and superstitious, spoke of a succubus, a demonic entity veiled in human flesh, feeding on the souls of men. But no one truly knew, and the queen, in her impenetrable silence, offered no answers, no clues, only the relentless, horrifying continuation of her nightly ritual. Bachelors feigned illness, married men suddenly discovered urgent duties and and even the most audacious of knights found themselves consumed by a sudden, inexplicable timidity. Those who passed by her chamber door in the late hours claimed to hear a faint, almost imperceptible hum emanating from within, a low thrum that seemed to vibrate through the very stone of the palace. Some swore they saw a faint, unearthly glow emanating from beneath the crack of her door, a light that was not firelight, nor moonlight, but something else entirely, something ancient and deeply unsettling. The palace staff, once bustling with life, now moved like ghosts, their faces pale, their eyes darting nervously, their conversations reduced to barely audible murmurs. The queen's handmaidens, forced into close proximity with their terrifying mistress, bore the heaviest burden. Their eyes were often red-rimmed from sleepless nights, their movements hesitant, as if perpetually braced for some unseen blow. They spoke when they dared of the queen's unnatural stillness, of her deep, unblinking gazes into the mirror, of the way she would sometimes hum a wordless, haunting melody, a tune that seemed to pluck at the very strings of the soul. The queen, however, seemed oblivious, or perhaps indifferent to the palpable fear that now permeated her court. Her movements remained graceful, her commands precise, her beauty undiminished, if anything, growing more radiant, more otherworldly with each passing victim. It was as if she fed on the terror, drew sustenance from the escalating dread that clung to every soul in He, too, was lured by her irresistible beauty, by the tantalizing promise of power and favor. The court watched, their faces pale with a growing understanding, as he, like Lysander, entered her chambers. And like Lysander, he was found dead the next morning, the same mask of unspeakable terror upon his face, the same inexplicable cause of death. The pattern was emerging, clear and horrific. A single night with the queen, followed by an inexplicable, terrifying demise. The whispered rumors, once dismissed as gossip, began to coalesce into a chilling truth, a truth too terrible to utter aloud, even in the deepest recesses of the palace. The next morning, as the first pale light of dawn crept over the horizon, a different kind of silence descended. It was the silence of shock, of disbelief, of a horror so profound it choked the breath from those who witnessed its consequence. Her beauty, combined with the immense power she wielded, continued to tempt some. Perhaps it was a fatal hubris, a belief in their own exceptionalism, a perverse desire to be the one to break the chilling cycle. Or perhaps it was the sheer, intoxicating promise of a single night with the most powerful and mesmerizing woman in the kingdom, a night that, despite its terrifying consequence, promised an experience unlike any other. And so, the grim dance continued. Noblemen, foreign dignitaries, even a renowned bard who had traveled from distant lands, captivated by tales of her beauty, all met the same chilling fate. Each morning, another body, another face frozen in terror, another inexplicable death. The physicians, baffled and increasingly distraught, could offer no explanation. The queen offered no solace, no explanation, only the cold, unyielding silence of absolute power. Lord Lysander, the vibrant, gifted nobleman, was found dead in his own bed, his face frozen in a rictus of terror, his body unmarked, yet utterly devoid of life. The royal physicians, summoned with frantic urgency, could find no cause of death, no poison, no visible wound, no sign of struggle. Only that look of abject terror, etched deeply onto his youthful features, as if he had stared into the very heart of darkness in his final moments. The queen, when informed, showed no emotion. Her eyes remained as cold and fathomless as the obsidian mirror, her expression unreadable. She simply ordered that he be given a quiet burial, and the matter, she declared, was closed. Her beauty, as we spoke, had become something almost supernatural, a mesmerizing, dangerous allure that seemed to promise untold delights, yet carried with it the undeniable scent of the grave. It was a beauty that drew men like moths to a fatal flame, an irresistible force that blinded them to the peril that lay concealed beneath the silken surface. The first to fall prey to this new, macabre ritual was a young nobleman, Lord Lysander, celebrated throughout Eldoria for his dashing good looks, his poetic spirit, and his unparalleled skill with a lute. He was a man of warmth and laughter, his presence a ray of sunshine in the increasingly sombre court. The queen, during a state banquet, had fixed her twilight eyes upon him, and a strange, almost imperceptible smile, both alluring and chilling, had played upon her lips. Lysander, flattered beyond measure by the attention of his sovereign, a woman renowned for her distant and unapproachable demeanor, had readily accepted her invitation to spend the evening in her private chambers. The court had watched, a collective gasp held in their throats, as he followed her, his face flushed with triumph, seemingly oblivious to the subtle shivers that ran through the assembled courtiers. They saw his youthful exuberance, his hopeful gaze, and a profound sense of foreboding settled upon them. The night that followed Lord Lysander's ascent to the Queen's chambers was marked by an eerie silence within the palace. But the matter was far from closed. It was merely the first brushstroke in a horrifying pattern that would define her reign. The court, once a vibrant collection of ambitious and influential figures, was now a gathering of pale, trembling shadows. Yet, despite the palpable fear, a strange, almost hypnotic allure persisted. The ritual itself, or what could be gleaned of it through the terrified whispers of the few palace staff who dared to speak, remained shrouded in mystery. The obsidian mirror, now a permanent fixture in her private chambers, its dark surface reflecting the flickering candlelight, seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy during these nights. The political landscape of Eldoria, once dominated by the queen's shrewd intellect, began to warp under the shadow of her escalating madness. The people of Eldoria, far removed from the immediate horrors of the court, began to notice the shift. Yet, despite the palpable dread, despite the growing understanding of her horrifying ritual, no one dared to openly challenge her. The chilling pattern of the queen's reign had solidified into an inescapable reality. Each dawn brought a fresh wave of dread, each night a renewed, silent prayer that no one they knew would be chosen for the queen's fatal embrace. Unlike others who succumbed to despair, Elias was driven by a quiet, burning curiosity. He remembered the old legends, dismissed as fairy tales, of a dark sorceress queen who had once ruled Eldoria in a distant, forgotten age, and who had been obsessed with an obsidian mirror. He sought corroborating texts, hidden references, any scrap of information that could confirm his terrifying hypothesis. He learned of the queen's mother Isolde, and the sudden, inexplicable illness that claimed her. Her coldness, her lack of emotion, her unreadable gaze. These were not inherent traits, but the marks of the obsidian heart's insidious influence, slowly replacing her soul with its own ancient, malevolent consciousness. No longer were they merely of inexplicable deaths, but of the queen's unnatural radiance, of the chilling glow from her chambers, of the ever-present obsidian mirror. He knew the queen's hunger would not be satiated by a mere handful of victims. He had seen historical accounts of similar artifacts, of ancient entities that demanded ever greater sacrifices as their power grew. She no longer engaged in intellectual discourse, no longer took pleasure in the arts. Her only discernible drive was the feeding of the mirror, and through it, the expansion of her own unnatural vitality. He knew that time was running out, that the tipping point was near. The queen's humanity was almost fully extinguished, and when it was, the obsidian heart would truly be unleashed, its ancient hunger no longer constrained by the vestiges of a human conscience, however warped. The stage was being set for a final, desperate confrontation, a clash, not of armies, but of wills, of humanity against an ancient, soulless evil, where the very soul of Eldoria hung in the balance. The terrifying truth of the queen's power had been unveiled, and with it, the chilling realization that her victims were not merely dead, but utterly consumed, their essence fueling the very evil that had claimed them. The haunting images were no longer just of dead men, but of flickering souls, trapped within the inky depths of the obsidian heart, their tormented whispers echoing in the dark chambers of the queen's terrifying reign. He feared that soon her lovers would not be enough. The mirror would demand more. It would demand quantity. It would demand the life force of the many, not just the few. He pictured a horrific future where the queen, a mere puppet of the obsidian heart, would unleash its insatiable hunger upon the entire kingdom, turning Eldoria into a desolate wasteland of vacant-eyed husks. This thought spurred him to greater risks, to bolder hints in his storytelling, though always with the utmost caution. He knew his life hung by a thread, that one misstep, one word to direct, would mean his own agonizing end. The people, exposed to Elias's carefully crafted tales, began to connect the dots, their superstitious fears merging with the chilling reality. Her focus was entirely on the mirror, on the next offering, on the steady accretion of power that flowed into her, making her seemingly invincible. She was becoming less human with each passing night, more a vessel, her movements precise, almost robotic, her expressions fixed in a mask of serene, terrifying indifference. The only sign of her true self, a faint flicker of what she once was, could only be seen, paradoxically, in the fleeting moments of heightened intensity before she claimed her victims, a glimmer of something akin to perverse pleasure in her eyes, a fleeting, almost animalistic satisfaction as the life drained from her chosen lover. But these glimpses were rare, swiftly replaced by the impenetrable mask of the obsidian heart. A subtle shift in the collective consciousness of Eldoria was occurring, a transformation from blind terror to a dawning, horrifying comprehension. The queen's beauty, once alluring, now seemed monstrous. Her silence, once regal, now chillingly vacant. The initial victims, the chosen lovers, were merely the first offerings in a grander, more terrifying design. The mirror's hunger, Elias suspected, would only grow, its demands becoming more frequent, its requirements more extreme. He imagined the queen's chilling nightly ritual, not as a perverse act of pleasure, but as a communion, a transfer, a feeding, the moments of intimacy, the fleeting passion, followed by the paralyzing terror of realization, were the perfect ingredients for the mirror's horrific feast. The victims died without a mark because their physical bodies were intact. It was their essence, their very life, that was meticulously and utterly consumed. He found a single cryptic notation in a royal physician's long-discarded journal to reveal his findings meant certain death, for the queen's agents were everywhere, and her reach was absolute. To remain silent meant to watch Eldoria descend further into the abyss, to become a graveyard for the queen's insatiable hunger. He knew he had to act, but with cunning, not with force. Force, against the queen and her unseen ally, was suicide. His only weapon was the truth, delivered in such a way that it could penetrate the pervasive fear that had paralyzed the kingdom. He began to weave his knowledge into subtle hints, into metaphors disguised as folk tales, into cryptic songs sung in hushed tones in the taverns, never directly accusing, but slowly planting seeds of suspicion, of understanding, among the common people. He spoke of ancient mirrors that steal souls, of queens who draw life from shadows, of beauty that masks unspeakable evil, speaking of an unusual draining of the queen's vitality in the days leading up to her death, a symptom the physician had dismissed as a feverish delusion. What if, Elias reasoned, the queen had not simply found the mirror, but had been subtly, subconsciously drawn to it, perhaps even influenced by it, long before she fully understood its power? What if her mother's death had not been mere illness, but the mirror's first, tentative taste of pure life force, drawn from the one most beloved by its new host? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. The queen, then, was not merely a sorceress, but a conduit, an increasingly willing instrument of an ancient, insatiable hunger. The pieces began to click into place, forming a horrifying mosaic. The obsidian heart was not merely a tool but a sentient entity, a parasitic intelligence that thrived on the concentrated life force of living beings, particularly when offered in moments of extreme emotional vulnerability such as the apex of desire, followed by the terror of impending death. The queen, he deduced, was using the passionate energy of her lovers, their peak of human vitality and emotion, as a catalyst to unlock the mirror's true power. Their final terror, the raw, primal fear of death, served as the ultimate offering, the concentrated essence that fueled the mirror. and in turn enhanced the queen's unnatural vitality, her chilling beauty, and her growing power. Each victim was not merely executed, but spiritually devoured, their very life force absorbed into the obsidian. The queen's chilling stillness, her unnatural beauty, the inexplicable deaths, the terror etched on the faces of her victims. It all pointed to the obsidian heart and to a process far more sinister than mere poison or even conventional dark magic. It was not just their lives she stole, but their very vitality, their essence, which was being absorbed by the mirror and then, inexplicably, transferred to her. He refused to believe that such unspeakable horrors could be without explanation, without a hidden key that could unlock the mystery. He began to pore over the most obscure texts, scrolls that were brittle with age, their script almost indecipherable, their contents dismissed by most as mere superstition. And it was there, buried beneath layers of forgotten lore, in a crumbling parchment detailing the forgotten rituals of a pre-Eldorian civilization, that he found it. A passage, chilling in its clarity, describing an ancient artifact known as the Obsidian Heart. The text spoke of a mirror not of ordinary making but forged from the petrified blood of a primordial beast, a mirror that could not only reflect but also absorb and amplify psychic energy, drawing the very life force from those who gazed too long into its depths. It also spoke of a specific, abhorrent ritual, the communion with the mirror in the presence of intense human emotion, fear, desire, and above all, profound devotion. This ritual, the text ominously warned, could grant immense power to the user, but at a terrible price: the gradual draining of their own humanity, transforming them into a vessel for the mirror's ancient, malevolent will. The court functioned like a macabre clockwork mechanism, its gears grinding under the weight of perpetual fear. But even in the deepest darkness, a sliver of light, however faint, sometimes appears, carried by those whose spirit, though battered, refuses to break. It was a young scholar, Elias, frail of body, but possessed of an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, who inadvertently stumbled upon a truth that would unravel the queen's terrifying secret. Elias, a quiet presence in the royal library, had always been drawn to the forgotten archives, to the dusty scrolls that spoke of ancient Eldoria, of its mythologies, its prophecies, and its long-lost magic. He had heard the whispers, of course, the terrifying tales of the queen's nightly ritual. The description sent a tremor through Elias's soul. Elias continued his clandestine research, driven by a growing sense of urgency. The more Elias delved, the more a horrifying picture emerged. Elias realized the true horror. The queen was not merely a murderer, but a creature of escalating depravity, her humanity slowly being consumed by the entity within the mirror. Armed with this terrifying knowledge, Elias faced a desperate dilemma. His subtle campaign was slow, almost imperceptible, but it began to take root. The fearful whispers in the court began to change. Yet, even as Elias worked, a desperate urgency gripped him. The queen, isolated in her power and increasingly consumed by the mirror's influence, seemed unaware of the subtle shift in her kingdom's perception. Elias, observing from the shadows, saw the growing transformation in her, the loss of her former sharp wit, replaced by a cold, calculating efficiency. Elias's quiet, persistent efforts had sown seeds of understanding, but the pervasive terror of the queen still held Eldoria in its icy grip. The whispers of the Obsidian Heart, once confined to dusty scrolls, now permeated the very air of the kingdom, transforming the queen from a distant, terrifying monarch into something far more monstrous in the minds of her people. They began to see her unnerving beauty not as a gift, but as a curse, a facade for an unspeakable evil. The palace, once a symbol of royal grandeur, became a haunted mausoleum, its silence broken only by the chilling thoughts of what transpired within its dark heart. The queen announced a grand festival, a celebration of Eldoria's prosperity, to be held within the palace walls. Thousands, drawn by the queen's invitation and a desperate hope for normalcy, thronged the grand halls, their faces hidden behind elaborate masks, their laughter brittle, their eyes darting nervously. The queen, resplendent in a gown the color of midnight, her own mask a delicate silver filigree that barely concealed the terrible glow in her eyes, moved among them like a predatory phantom. The light from the mirror intensified, spreading throughout the ballroom, a wave of shimmering, dark energy that seemed to cling to every individual. Elias, knowing this was his only chance, his final stand against the encroaching darkness, pushed his way through the petrified crowd. The violet light flickered, pulsed violently, and then, with a shattering crack that echoed through the very foundations of the palace, the obsidian heart exploded. The light returned to the ballroom, but it was a cold, harsh light, illuminating the horror of what had transpired. The ethereal beauty dissolved, revealing the true cost of her unholy power. Her skin became parchmentine, her hair turned brittle white, and her eyes, once luminous and terrifying, now sagged in their sockets, dull and lifeless. The years of stolen vitality, the accumulated essence of countless lives, had been a temporary loan, now savagely wreaked. He dedicated the rest of his life to chronicling the true story of the Obsidian Queen, ensuring that this dark chapter of Eldorian history would never be forgotten, but also that the dangers of unchecked power and ancient evils would serve as a perpetual warning. The kingdom of Eldoria slowly, painstakingly, began the long process of healing. The scars of the Obsidian Queen's reign ran deep, not just in the diminished vitality of its people, but in the collective memory, a haunting image engraved in their souls. The once vibrant forests seemed to whisper a melancholic tune, the rivers flowed with a mournful murmur, and the mountains stood as silent, enduring witnesses to a time when beauty masked unspeakable horror, and a queen, driven by a thirst for power and influenced by an ancient, malevolent artifact, plunged her kingdom into a nightmare from which it would never fully awaken. The story of the mad queen who executed her lovers after one night became a chilling legend, a cautionary tale whispered in the darkest hours, a testament to the enduring power of ambition and the terrifying cost of an unholy bargain. The echoes of that night, of the silent screams and the draining of life, would forever reverberate through the silent depths of history, a haunting legacy etched into the very soul of Eld. She was an ancient, withered crone, her form twisted, her face a mask of profound, ancient weariness, a testament to the parasitic bargain she had struck. She collapsed to the floor, a broken, empty vessel, her power utterly extinguished. Thousands lay collapsed on the floor, unconscious, their faces pale, their bodies frail, their eyes vacant, living husks, their essence irrevocably stolen, but their lives, miraculously, spared from complete consumption. Her reign of terror was over. Eldoria was free, but at an immeasurable cost. The masquerade had ended, not in revelry, but in a silent, collective trauma that would haunt the kingdom for generations. The people who had been touched by the obsidian heart would carry its mark for the rest of their days, their laughter muted, their spirits subdued, forever living in the echo of that terrible night. The price of their survival was their vitality, their joy, their very spark. They were shadows of their former selves, forever marked by the obsidian heart's terrifying touch. Fragments of dark, glittering glass rained down upon the paralyzed crowd, shards of pure darkness scattering across the polished floor. Clutching a small, tarnished silver amulet, an artifact he had discovered in the most forbidden section of the archives, a relic rumored to possess the power to disrupt dark magical concentrations. He knew the risk was immense, the chance of success infinitesimally small. She never spoke again, her eyes vacant, staring into an unseen abyss, a mere shell of the terrifying monarch she had once been. The shattered fragments of the obsidian heart were gathered and entombed in the deepest, most sacred vaults of the kingdom, sealed away with ancient wards and powerful spells, ensuring that its malevolent power would never again be unleashed upon the world. But he also knew that Eldoria, and perhaps the world, depended on this desperate gamble. He reached the dais, his breath ragged, his body trembling, and with a final, desperate surge of will, he raised the amulet, thrusting it towards the pulsating obsidian heart. Elias, hidden among the terrified throng, watched in horror as people began to sway, their movements becoming sluggish, their eyes, visible through the slits of their masks, wide with incomprehension and then dawning horror. The color began to drain from their faces, their skin taking on a pale, almost translucent quality. Their vibrant laughter and brittle smiles twisted into silent screams, their bodies trembling uncontrollably as the mirror, through the queen, began to feast. It was not a sudden death, but a gradual, agonizing, draining, a siphoning of vitality, a silent, terrifying consumption of thousands of souls. The air in the ballroom grew thick, not just with perfume and the scent of wine, but with a palpable, escalating tension. The music, initially lively, began to subtly shift, its tempo accelerating, its melodies becoming increasingly discordant, almost frantic. The obsidian heart, now brought to a place of prominence on a dais, overlooking the entire ballroom, pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible rhythm, a dark beat that seemed to synchronize with the accelerating heartbeats of the assembled multitude. It was to be a masquerade, a night of revelry and masked anonymity, where all citizens, from the lowest commoner to the highest noble, were invited to partake in the Queen's generosity. The announcement sent shivers down the spines of those who had followed Elias's subtle warnings. A mass gathering, a concentration of people, their emotions heightened by drink and false merriment. It was a perfect feast for the obsidian heart. This was not a celebration, it was a harvest. The Queen, however, remained isolated in her unholy communion with the mirror. Her human needs diminished. She rarely ate. Her sleep was fleeting, often spent staring into the obsidian heart's depths. The music ceased abruptly, plunging the grand hall into a silence so profound it was deafening. The masks, designed for anonymity, now became grotesque prisons, trapping the rising tide of fear on thousands of faces. The Queen's voice, clear and cold, echoed through the suddenly suffocating silence. "Tonight," she proclaimed, her voice imbued with an unsettling power that vibrated through the very stone, "we shall truly celebrate Aldoria's strength. We shall offer a tribute worthy of our greatness." As she spoke, the obsidian mirror behind her flared with an unholy, violet light, a light that seemed to draw the very breath from the assembled mass. Her conversations, even with her most trusted advisers, became brief, devoid of warmth or true engagement. She was a puppet on invisible strings, her will increasingly subsumed by the ancient entity. The palace staff, now truly like ghosts, moved with trembling hands and downcast eyes, terrified of drawing her attention, lest they become the next conduit for the mirror's insatiable hunger. They spoke of a subtle, almost electrical charge in the air round the Queen, a faint hum that preceded her appearance, and a lingering chill in any room she had recently departed. It was as if the obsidian heart was now permanently fused with her very being, its malevolent energy radiating outwards. Elias, observing from the periphery, saw the signs of the mirror's escalated demands. The Queen's beauty, while still breathtaking, now had an almost brittle quality, as if stretched too thin. Her eyes, once merely the color of twilight, now seemed to flicker with an inner, unholy light, a reflection of the mirror's pulsing depths. He knew the mirror's hunger was reaching a fever pitch. It was demanding more. The singular, passionate energy of one lover a night was no longer sufficient. It craved the raw, untamed fear of many, the concentrated essence of a kingdom in terror. He saw the cold calculation in her gaze as she observed the court no longer selecting individuals based on beauty or charm, but on a more primal, terrifying criterion: the strength of their latent fear, the richness of their life force. The inevitable, chilling escalation came with a royal decree that echoed through the kingdom like a death knell. The night of the masquerade arrived, cloaked in an unnatural silence that belied the supposed gaiety within the palace. Then, at the stroke of midnight, the Queen raised a hand. A collective gasp, born of pure, unadulterated terror, swept through the hall. Amidst the growing chaos, a desperate, defiant act was born. As the silver amulet, dull and unremarkable, came into contact with the unholy radiance of the mirror, a deafening shriek tore through the hall, a sound that was not human, but ancient and filled with unspeakable agony. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The draining sensation ceased, and the Queen, when the mirror shattered, a transformation, swift and horrifying, swept over her. The few guards who had not been directly affected by the mirror's last, desperate surge moved forward, seizing the withered Queen. The Queen, stripped of her power, her humanity irrevocably lost, was confined to the deepest dungeons, her withered form a chilling reminder of the horrors she had unleashed. Elias, the unassuming scholar, was hailed as a hero, though he bore the weight of what he had witnessed, the lingering horror of the silent massacre.